The plates were getting heavier by the minute. Lily balanced 3 of them on her left arm, while using her right hand to pour water into a customer's glass. The restaurant buzzed with the usual Friday night crowd, businessmen closing deals, couples on dates, and tourists trying to experience what the locals called the best seafood in Manhattan. Order up for table 7. The chef called from the kitchen. Lily nodded, quickly delivered the plates she was carrying, and rushed to pick up the new order. Her feet ached. She'd been on shift since 11 that morning, and the clock now showed just past 8 in the evening. 9 more hours on her feet, but the double shifts were worth it. Every extra dollar went straight into the envelope marked May's college fund. The thought of her younger sister made her smile despite her exhaustion. May was brilliant, far smarter than Lily had ever been, and had just started her 2nd year at NYU. Their parents would have been so proud. "Hey, Lily, you okay to stay until closing?" Her manager, Rick, asked, appearing suddenly beside her. Tanya called in sick again. "Sure," Lily said, even though her body screamed for rest. "I could use the extra hours." Rick smiled gratefully. "Thanks. Oh, and heads up, we've got a VIP coming in at 9. Last-minute reservation. Some tech billionaire and his entourage." Lily nodded, but her attention was already back on her tables. A couple at table 4 was trying to catch her eye for the check, and the businessmen at table 12 needed their drinks refreshed. The next hour passed in a blur of orders, complaints, and forced smiles. Just before 9, Rick gathered the waitstaff in the kitchen. "Listen up, everyone. Alexander Hudson just reserved our private dining room. For those who don't know, he founded Horizon Tech and is worth something like $30 billion. A murmur went through the staff. Even Lily, who barely had time to check her phone between shifts, had heard of Hudson. His face was all over the business magazines that customers left behind. "He's bringing 15 people. They've ordered the premium tasting menu with wine pairings. This could mean serious tips, but I've heard he can be demanding." Rick looked uncomfortable. "We need our best servers on this." "I'm thinking, let's draw straws," suggested Carlos, one of the senior waiters. "Fair's fair. We're all tired and nobody wants to deal with entitled rich folks tonight." Rick hesitated, then nodded. "Fine. Short straw gets Hudson's table." Lily watched as Rick broke a handful of toothpicks into different lengths. She silently prayed for a long one. The last thing she needed tonight was some billionaire snapping his fingers at her. When her turn came, she picked a toothpick from Rick's fist and immediately felt her stomach sink. "The shortest one." "Of course, bad luck, Lily," Carlos said, patting her shoulder. "Just smile and nod a lot. These types love that." 30 minutes later, Alexander Hudson arrived with his party. Executives, clients, and what looked like a few people just pretty enough to be decorative. Hudson himself walked in last. He was younger than Lily expected, maybe in his early 40s, with dark hair graying at the temples and the kind of tan that came from yachts, not beaches where regular people swam. "Mr. Hudson." "Welcome to Oceano," Rick said, practically bowing. "We're honored to have you with us tonight. This is Lily. She'll be taking care of you this evening." Hudson's eyes barely flicked over Lily as Rick led them to the private dining room at the back of the restaurant. It was Oceano's crown jewel: intimate lighting, hand-painted murals of the Mediterranean, and a baby grand piano in the corner that was mostly for show. Once a month they hired a pianist for their special dinner events, but tonight it sat silent. "The table looks acceptable," Hudson said, glancing around. "We'll start with champagne. Bring 6 bottles of the Krug Grand Cuvée." Lily nodded and hurried to the wine cellar. 6 bottles of their most expensive champagne, over $400 each. The bill for this table would be more than she made in 2 months. When she returned with the first round of champagne, the group was already loud, laughing at some joke Hudson had made. Lily carefully opened the first bottle, the pop drawing approving glances. "I'll pour," she said, approaching Hudson first as she leaned in to fill his glass. Hudson finally looked at her, really looked at her, and Lily felt a strange chill. His eyes weren't cold exactly, but calculating, as if he were assessing her market value. "Your hands," he said suddenly. Lily paused. The champagne bottle tilted mid-pour. "Sir, your hands," he repeated. "They're not a waitress's hands." The table fell quiet. Lily felt her cheeks warm as everyone stared at her hands holding the bottle. I don't understand," she said. Hudson leaned back in his chair. "Waitresses usually have calloused hands. Short nails. Yours are different. Long fingers. You take care of them despite this job." He took a sip of champagne. "You play an instrument," Piano, I'd guess. The room felt suddenly airless. How could he possibly know that? I used to, Lily admitted. A long time ago. Used to. Hudson raised an eyebrow. No one just stops playing if they were any good. One of the women at the table laughed nervously. Alex, leave the poor girl alone. Let's talk about the Singapore deal. But Hudson's focus remained on Lily. What happened? Why did you stop? The question hit like a physical blow. 3 years of carefully avoiding this exact topic. And now a stranger was demanding answers. Lily's grip tightened on the champagne bottle. Family responsibilities, she said simply, hoping he would drop it. To her relief, someone asked about stock options, and Hudson's attention shifted. Lily finished pouring the champagne and retreated to the perimeter of the room, available but invisible, the way good servers were supposed to be. As the night progressed, the group grew louder. The tasting menu, 9 courses of Oceano's finest dishes, was served and praised. Wine flowed freely. Hudson ordered rare bottles not on the menu, which Rick scrambled to procure. By the dessert course, several members of the party were visibly drunk, including Hudson himself. Lily moved efficiently between the kitchen and dining room, her mask of professional pleasantness firmly in place. She was just serving coffee when she heard the scrape of a chair. Hudson had stood up and was walking unsteadily toward the piano in the corner. Does this work? He asked no one in particular, lifting the fallboard to reveal the keys. Yes, sir, Lily answered automatically. It's tuned monthly. Hudson pressed a key, the single note hanging in the air. I always wanted to learn, he said, his words slightly slurred. Never had the patience. He looked up, his gaze finding Lily again. But you have the patience, don't you? The discipline. Lily didn't answer. She busied herself clearing empty coffee cups. Play something, Hudson said suddenly. The request, no, the command, stopped Lily in her tracks. Excuse me? The piano. Play something for us. Hudson gestured expansively to his guests. We'd all enjoy some entertainment, wouldn't we? The table murmured in agreement, though a few looked embarrassed by his demand. I'm sorry, sir. I'm working, Lily said as politely as she could. Hudson's expression darkened. I'm offering you a break from carrying plates. Most people would be grateful. Alex, one of the men cautioned. The lady said no. I'm not asking for a kidney, Hudson snapped. Just a song. What's the harm? Lily could feel Rick hovering anxiously near the door. A scene with their wealthiest customer of the night was the last thing the restaurant needed. Perhaps we could call a professional pianist for your next visit, Lily suggested. With proper notice, I don't want a professional. I want you. Hudson's voice had taken on a stubborn, childish quality. One song. I'll make it worth your while. He pulled out his wallet and dropped several $100 bills on the table. Consider it a tip. The money made Lily's stomach turn. 3 years ago, she would have walked out without a second thought. But now there was May to think about and rent due next week, and the letter from the hospital about the payment plan that was sitting unopened on her kitchen counter. Mr. Hudson, Rick intervened, his manager smile firmly in place. Perhaps we could offer you a complimentary dessert wine instead. We have a lovely... Are you refusing a customer request? Hudson interrupted. His tone made it clear what the consequences of that might be. Rick paled. Of course not, sir. It's just that our staff aren't performers, they're... I'll do it, Lily said quietly. Every eye in the room turned to her. One song, Hudson smiled triumphantly. Excellent. As Lily made her way to the piano, she felt a strange mix of dread and something else. Something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the bench. The last time she had touched a piano was 3 years ago, the day before the accident. She had been preparing for her final recital at the music conservatory, the culmination of 15 years of lessons, practice, and dreams. The piece she'd been working on was still there, waiting in her muscle memory, though she'd done everything possible to forget it. Lily sat down and placed her fingers on the keys. The ivory felt cool and familiar, like greeting an old friend who had become a stranger. She took a deep breath, aware of the silence that had fallen over the room, of Hudson watching her with keen interest despite his drunkenness. What would she play? The question hung in her mind as her fingers rested motionless on the keys. Behind her, she could feel the weight of expectation growing heavier by the second. And then, without conscious decision, her fingers began to move. As Lily's fingers hovered over the keys, the dining room fell into an expectant hush. She could feel every eye on her, the kitchen staff peering through the doorway, Rick nervously shifting his weight from one foot to the other, and Hudson's intense gaze boring into her back. "We don't have all night," Hudson called out, his words slightly slurred. "Play something impressive." One of the women at his table, a tall blonde in a red dress, touched his arm. "Alex, maybe we should just go. The poor girl is clearly uncomfortable." "Nonsense," Hudson replied, shrugging her off. "I'm paying good money to hear her play." Lily's cheeks burned. She was being treated like a circus animal, expected to perform on command. Part of her wanted to walk away, to tell this arrogant billionaire exactly what she thought of him. But then she thought of May, of tuition payments and textbooks and all the sacrifices they'd both made. She took a deep breath and began to play. The first notes were tentative, a simple melody from a beginner's practice book, something she could play in her sleep even after all this time. She winced at a wrong note, her fingers stiff and uncooperative after 3 years away from the keys. "Is that it?" Hudson's voice cut through the music. "My 5-year-old nephew plays better than that." Laughter rippled through his entourage, though some looked embarrassed by his rudeness. Rick stepped forward, ready to intervene, but Lily shook her head slightly. She didn't need rescuing. Instead, she started again. This time she chose a piece she had mastered as a teenager, Debussy's Clair de Lune. The gentle, flowing notes came back to her gradually, like remembering the words to a half-forgotten poem. It wasn't perfect. Her timing was off, and she fumbled through some of the more complex passages, but the beauty of the piece still shone through. When she finished, there was a smattering of applause from the table. Hudson, however, looked unimpressed. "Better," he said, "but still amateur hour. I was hoping for something more memorable." "I told you I haven't played in years," Lily said, standing up from the bench. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other tables to attend to." "Wait." Hudson's command froze her in place. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick fold of cash. $10,000. A collective gasp went up from the staff watching. Even the other wealthy guests at the table looked surprised. 10,000, Hudson repeated, fanning the bills. "For one truly exceptional performance. Show me what you were before you became this." He waved dismissively at her uniform. Lily stared at the money. $10,000 would cover May's tuition for the semester, with enough left over to finally fix the leaking roof in their apartment. $10,000 would mean no more double shifts, at least for a while. "And if I refuse?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Hudson's smile turned cold. "Well, this restaurant is for sale. Did you know that? The owner's been looking for a buyer for months. I've been thinking about expanding my portfolio into the hospitality industry." He took a sip of his wine. "First order of business would be to evaluate the staff, of course. Make some necessary cuts." Rick went pale. "Mr. Hudson, surely there's no need for—" "It's just business," Hudson said with a shrug. "Unless, of course, your waitress here decides to entertain us properly." The room fell silent again. Lily looked around at her co-workers' faces. Carlos, who had 3 kids in school. Diane, who was saving for her mother's cancer treatments. Raj, who sent half his paycheck to family back home. None of them could afford to lose this job. "Fine," Lily said through clenched teeth. "One song. And then you leave everyone here alone." Hudson nodded, looking pleased with himself. "Deal." As Lily sat back down at the piano, the weight of what she was about to do pressed down on her. She hadn't played, really played, since the night before her parents' accident. She had sworn never to touch a piano again after that, as if her music somehow had been responsible for their deaths. The piece she had been preparing for her final recital was Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto, Number 2. It was a monster of a composition, technically demanding, emotionally complex, and utterly heartbreaking in places. Without an orchestra behind her, she would have to suggest all those other instruments with just her 2 hands. Lily closed her eyes, trying to remember how it began. For a moment, panic seized her. What if she couldn't do it? What if all that training, all those years of sacrifice had simply evaporated? Then she remembered her mother sitting beside her on the bench when she was 6 years old, guiding her small hands over the keys. "Music isn't in your fingers, Lily," she would say. "It's in your heart. Your fingers just help it get out." Lily opened her eyes, placed her hands on the keys, and began to play. The famous opening chords of the Rachmaninoff filled the room, dark, resonant like church bells tolling in the distance. The tempo was slow at first, building tension, drawing listeners in. Lily stumbled once or twice, her muscle memory taking a moment to reawaken, but then something shifted inside her. It was like a door opening or a dam breaking, and suddenly the music was pouring out of her. Her fingers found their old strength and agility, dancing across the keys with increasing confidence. The piece grew more intense, building toward the first climax, and Lily leaned into it with her whole body. Her back straightened, her chin lifted, and she was no longer a waitress playing for tips. She was a musician again, speaking the only language that had ever made complete sense to her. The dining room disappeared. Hudson and his guests faded away. There was only Lily and the piano and the music that had been locked inside her for 3 long years. She didn't hold back. She played with all the fury and grief she had been carrying since the accident. She played for her parents, who would never hear her again, for May, who had given up so much, and for herself, for the dreams she had abandoned and the guilt she had carried. As she reached the most technically challenging section, her fingers flying across the keys at breathtaking speed, she became aware of movement around her. The kitchen staff had all come out to listen. Customers from the main dining room were standing in the doorway. Even Hudson's group had fallen completely silent, all pretense of disinterest gone. The piece lasted nearly 20 minutes, but to Lily it felt like seconds and eternity all at once. When she hit the final thunderous chords, the sound seemed to hang in the air, vibrating with emotion, then silence. Lily sat still, her hands resting on the keys, her breathing ragged. She felt hollowed out, as if something essential had been scooped from her chest, but there was also a curious lightness, like she had set down a burden she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. Slowly, the world came back into focus. She turned on the bench to face Hudson's table. The expression on the billionaire's face shocked her. His earlier smugness was gone, replaced by something raw and vulnerable. His eyes were bright with unshed tears, and he was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles had turned white. The blonde woman beside him was openly crying. Others at the table looked stunned, as if they had witnessed something they couldn't quite comprehend. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then someone in the doorway began to applaud. Others joined in, the sound swelling until the small room rang with it. Waiters, cooks, customers, even Rick, they were all clapping, some whistling and cheering. Lily stood awkwardly, unsure how to respond. She hadn't performed for an audience in so long, she had forgotten the proper way to acknowledge applause. She settled for a small nod, her eyes lowered. As the applause finally died down, Hudson stood up. He walked toward her, his steps unsteady but his gaze clear. When he reached her, he held out the fold of cash. "Take it," he said quietly. "You more than earned it." Lily hesitated, then accepted the money. "Thank you." Hudson didn't move away. He stood looking at her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "That piece," he said, "Rachmaninoff's Second Concerto. It was my mother's favorite." He swallowed hard. She was a concert pianist. "Not as good as you, though." Lily didn't know what to say to that. "I'm sure she was wonderful." "She died when I was 12, Hudson continued, as if Lily had asked. "Cancer. I was at boarding school in Switzerland. They didn't even let me come home for the funeral." His voice was flat, matter of fact, but his eyes told a different story. Suddenly, Lily understood something about Alexander Hudson that explained his behavior. Not excused it, but explained it. Behind the arrogance and the billions, he was just another person carrying grief and regret, the same as her. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it. Hudson nodded once, then seemed to remember himself. He straightened his shoulders, and just like that, the mask of the imperious billionaire slipped back into place. "Well," he said louder now, addressing his guests, "I think that was worth the price of admission, don't you?" The group murmured agreement, though many were still looking at Lily with newfound respect. "Miss," Hudson trailed off, realizing he didn't know her name. "Lily," she supplied. "Ms. Lily," he continued. "I believe we have more to discuss, but not here, not tonight." He pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to her. "Call my office tomorrow. My assistant will put you through." Before Lily could respond, Hudson turned back to his table. "Check, please. And a round of your best scotch for everyone." As Lily tucked the card and the money into her pocket, she caught Rick's eye. He gave her a bewildered thumbs up, clearly relieved that the situation had resolved itself so profitably for everyone involved. But as Lily returned to her duties, bringing the requested scotch and preparing the substantial bill, she couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental had just happened, something that would change the course of her life in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Lily couldn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the echo of piano keys and saw Hudson's face, that unexpected moment of raw vulnerability before his billionaire mask slipped back into place. The business card he'd given her sat on her nightstand. It was heavy, made of some expensive paper that felt like fabric, with just his name and a phone number embossed in silver. No company name, no title. Alexander Hudson didn't need to explain who he was. When her alarm went off at 6 a.m., Lily had been awake for hours. She dragged herself to the kitchen of the small apartment she shared with May and put on coffee. The envelope with Hudson's money was on the counter where she'd left it last night, $10,000 in $100 bills. She still couldn't quite believe it was real. "Morning," May said, shuffling into the kitchen in pajamas and fuzzy socks. At 19, her sister looked so much like their mother that sometimes it made Lily's chest ache. "Whoa, you look terrible." "Rough shift?" Lily pushed a mug of coffee toward her. "You could say that. What's that?" May asked, noticing the envelope. Lily took a deep breath. "My tip from last night." May's eyes widened as Lily explained what had happened with Hudson and his party, the coercion, the performance, and his strange reaction afterward. "Let me get this straight," May said when Lily finished. "This jerk threatened everyone's jobs to force you to play piano, then had some kind of emotional breakdown and gave you 10 grand? That's about the size of it." May picked up the business card, turning it over in her hands. "And now he wants to meet with you? That's not creepy at all." "I know how it sounds," Lily admitted, "but there was something, I don't know. Something happened in that room last night. It wasn't just about him being a bully." "So you're going to call him?" May asked skeptically. Lily hesitated. "I don't know yet." After May left for her morning class, Lily sat at their small kitchen table staring at the business card. What could Hudson possibly want from her? Was this some kind of weird power play? Or worse, was he interested in her romantically? The thought made her stomach turn. But there had been something genuine about his reaction to her playing. The way he'd mentioned his mother, the concert pianist. There was real pain there, not just the entitlement of a man used to getting his way. Before she could talk herself out of it, Lily picked up her phone and dialed the number. "Mr. Hudson's office," a crisp female voice answered. "This is Lily Chen," she said, suddenly nervous. "Mr. Hudson asked me to call." Ms. Chen, yes, Mr. Hudson is expecting your call. Please hold." There was a click, and then Hudson himself was on the line. "Ms. Chen, I was beginning to think you wouldn't call." "I almost didn't," Lily admitted. There was a pause, and then a short laugh. "Honesty. Refreshing." His voice sounded different over the phone, more controlled, less of the drunken arrogance from last night. "I'd like to meet with you today, if possible, to discuss a proposition." "What kind of proposition?" "One that could be very beneficial to you." "Are you free this afternoon?" "Say 2 o'clock?" Lily thought about her shift at the restaurant. After last night, Rick would probably give her the day off if she asked. "I could be." "Excellent. I'll send a car for you." He paused. "And Ms. Chen?" "Bring your sister." Lily froze. "How do you know about my sister?" "I make it my business to know things about people who interest me." 2 o'clock. The car will be at your apartment." He hung up before she could respond. Lily sat there, the phone still pressed to her ear, a chill running down her spine. How did he know about May? How did he know where they lived? She considered calling back to cancel, but curiosity, and yes, the memory of that $10,000 made her hesitate. She texted May. "Change of plans. Skip your afternoon class. We're meeting Alexander Hudson at 2." May's response came immediately. "Are you insane?" "No way." "Lily, he specifically asked for you to come, and he knows where we live." "May, that's even creepier. Hard pass." "Lily, he's offering something beneficial. Could be money." "For school?" There was a long pause before May replied. "Fine, but if he's weird, we're leaving instantly." At exactly 1:30, a sleek black car pulled up outside their apartment building. The driver, a woman in a dark suit, opened the door for them. "Miss Chen and Miss Chen? Mr. Hudson sent me." The car was the most luxurious vehicle Lily had ever been in, with butter-soft leather seats and a privacy screen between them and the driver. May looked around with wide eyes, momentarily forgetting her apprehension. "Where are we going?" Lily asked as they pulled away from the curb. "Mr. Hudson's residence," the driver replied. "In Greenwich, Connecticut, one of the wealthiest towns in America." The drive took almost an hour, during which Lily and May sat in nervous silence, watching as the city gave way to lush green suburbs and increasingly massive estates. Hudson's home, when they finally arrived, was more like a small palace, a sprawling stone mansion set back from the road, with perfectly manicured gardens and a circular driveway leading to imposing front doors. "This is ridiculous," May whispered as they were led inside by a uniformed housekeeper. "Who needs this much house?" The interior was just as impressive. Soaring ceilings, museum-quality art on the walls, furniture that looked too expensive to actually sit on. The housekeeper led them through a series of rooms, each more opulent than the last, until they reached what appeared to be a music room. And what a music room it was. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the gardens, bathing the space in natural light. In the center of the room stood not one but two grand pianos, massive black instruments that gleamed in the sunlight. Hudson was standing by one of the pianos looking out the window. He was dressed more casually than the night before, in dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt, but somehow he still exuded wealth and power. He turned as they entered. "Ms. Chen, and this must be May. Thank you both for coming." His gaze lingered on May, but not in the way Lily had feared. There was something like recognition in his eyes, almost sadness. "Why are we here, Mr. Hudson?" Lily asked, cutting straight to the point. Hudson gestured to the sofas arranged at one end of the room. "Please sit. Can I offer you something to drink? Tea, coffee?" "We're fine," Lily said, though she remained standing. "You said you had a proposition for me." Hudson nodded, seemingly unsurprised by her directness. "First, I owe you an apology for my behavior last night. I was drunk, but that's no excuse. I was rude and coercive, and I'm sorry." The apology caught Lily off guard. It sounded sincere, which didn't match the arrogant billionaire from the restaurant. "Apology accepted," she said cautiously. "But that doesn't explain why we're here." Hudson moved to one of the pianos, running his fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. "Your playing last night. It reminded me of someone. My mother, as I mentioned, but also someone else, someone I knew a long time ago." He looked up at May again. "Your parents were Thomas and Grace Chen, weren't they?" Lily felt as if the floor had dropped out from under her. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because I knew them," Hudson said simply. "Your father was my piano teacher when I was a boy." The revelation hit Lily like a physical blow. That's not possible." "It is," Hudson insisted. "Thomas Chen. He taught at the Westport Academy of Music in the early 90s. I was one of his students for about 2 years, before I was sent to boarding school in Switzerland." Lily exchanged a shocked look with May. Their father had indeed taught at Westport before they were born. He had met their mother there. She was a violin teacher. "I was a terrible student," Hudson continued. "No patience, as I said last night. But your father was kind to me, even when I didn't deserve it. He gave me a recording once, your mother playing Bach, said it might inspire me." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "It didn't, but I kept it anyway. If you knew our parents, why didn't you say something last night?" May asked, speaking for the first time. "I didn't know who Lily was until she played," Hudson explained. "But something about her technique. It was so familiar. I had my people do some research afterward. When I saw your names, I knew." Lily sank onto one of the sofas, her legs suddenly unable to support her. "This is a lot to take in," Hudson nodded. "I understand. But it explains why I've asked you here today." He took a deep breath. "I want to offer you a second chance at the career you gave up." "What do you mean?" Lily asked. Though she had a sinking feeling she knew exactly what he meant. "You were at Juilliard when your parents died, correct? About to graduate?" Lily nodded mutely. "I'd like to establish a fellowship in your parents' names. It would cover all expenses for you to return to school and complete your degree, and afterward I can arrange auditions with the top orchestras and venues." "Why would you do that?" May asked, suspicion clear in her voice. Hudson looked uncomfortable for the first time. "Call it making amends. Not just for last night, but for larger failings. I didn't appreciate what your father tried to teach me. About music, yes, but also about life. About what really matters. He ran a hand through his hair. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, but I've built nothing of real value. Nothing that brings beauty into the world. The room fell silent. Lily could hear the soft ticking of an antique clock somewhere nearby, counting out seconds as she tried to process everything Hudson had said. I can't just go back to school, she said finally. May is still in college. I have responsibilities. The fellowship would include a stipend for living expenses, Hudson countered. More than enough for both of you. And May's tuition at NYU would be covered as well, of course. May's eyes widened. My tuition too? Hudson nodded. Consider it part of the package. Lily felt dizzy with the possibility suddenly opening before her. To play again, seriously. To finish what she'd started before the accident. But something still didn't add up. Last night, she said slowly, when you insisted I play, you didn't know who I was then. Why did you do it? For the first time, Hudson looked genuinely ashamed. Because I could, he admitted. Because I'm used to getting what I want. Because sometimes I'm still that spoiled, impatient boy your father tried and failed to teach. He met her gaze directly. But hearing you play changed something. Reminded me of something I'd forgotten. And now I have a chance to make at least one thing right. Lily looked at May, who was watching her intently. This decision wasn't just about her, it never had been. I need time to think about it, she said finally. Hudson nodded. Of course. Take as much time as you need. He picked up an envelope from the piano and handed it to her. All the details are in here. My direct number is included. As they stood to leave, Hudson stepped toward the piano again. Would you play something before you go? Something your father taught you, perhaps? Lily hesitated, torn between lingering suspicion and the undeniable pull of those beautiful instruments. I don't think so. Not today. Hudson nodded, accepting her decision without argument. Another time, perhaps. As the same black car drove them back to the city, Lily and May sat in stunned silence, the envelope heavy in Lily's lap. Do you believe him? May asked finally. About knowing Dad? Lily stared out the window at the passing scenery. I don't know. It could be true. Dad had lots of students before we were born. Are you going to take his offer? That was the million-dollar question, or rather, the question worth far more than that. A full ride to Juilliard, living expenses, May's tuition covered. A chance to reclaim the future she'd abandoned 3 years ago. I don't know that either, Lily admitted. It feels too good to be true. May leaned her head on Lily's shoulder. Maybe some good things are true anyway. Lily thought about Hudson's face when he'd heard her play, that moment of genuine emotion breaking through his carefully constructed facade. There had been truth in that moment. Whatever his motives might be now. Maybe, she agreed softly, her fingers unconsciously moving in her lap, playing invisible keys, remembering. For 3 days, Lily carried Hudson's envelope everywhere but couldn't bring herself to open it. She returned to work at the restaurant where everyone treated her differently now. Some co-workers asked for impromptu piano lessons. Others wondered aloud if she'd sleep with Hudson for money. Rick gave her the best tables and reminded her repeatedly how lucky they all were that she'd handled the situation so well. Only Carlos, the senior waiter, seemed to understand her discomfort. It's hard when people suddenly see you differently, he said as they folded napkins before the dinner shift. When I came to this country, I was an engineer. Now I'm just the guy who brings food. Lily looked up in surprise. I didn't know you were an engineer, Carlos shrugged. Nobody asks. They look at the uniform, not the person. He nodded at her hands. But your hands gave you away. They told your real story. That night after her shift, Lily finally opened the envelope. Inside was a formal letter on heavy stationery, outlining the Thomas and Grace Chen Fellowship in Piano Performance. The terms were even more generous than Hudson had described. Full tuition at Juilliard, a monthly stipend that was triple what she made at the restaurant, comprehensive health care coverage for both her and May, and May's NYU tuition fully covered through graduation. There was also a personal note from Hudson, handwritten on a small card. No strings attached. This is not charity or guilt money. It's an investment in something beautiful. Lily sat on the edge of her bed, reading and rereading the documents until the words blurred. When May came home from her evening study group, she found Lily still sitting there, the papers spread around her. You opened it, May said, sitting beside her. And, it's real, Lily whispered. Everything he promised. Maybe more. May picked up the official letter, scanning the details. This is wow, she looked at her sister. What are you going to do? I don't know, Lily's voice cracked. Part of me wants to say yes so badly, but another part feels like I'd be betraying Mom and Dad somehow. Betraying them. How is by going back to music? By being happy when they're gone. The words caught in Lily's throat. I was practicing when it happened, May. I was playing Rachmaninoff while they were driving to pick up your birthday cake. If I hadn't been so focused on my stupid recital, maybe I would have gone with them. Or maybe they would have left earlier or later and missed that truck. Stop. May grabbed her sister's hands. Stop it right now. Their accident wasn't your fault. It was a drunk driver who ran a red light, not you. Not your music. Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks. But I promised myself I'd take care of you. That I'd be responsible. And you have been. For 3 years you've worked yourself to exhaustion for me. May's own eyes were wet now. But I never asked you to give up your dreams. I never wanted that burden. I know, but no buts, May interrupted. Mom and Dad would hate knowing you gave up music because of them. You know that. Dad especially. Remember how he used to say your hands were magic? Lily nodded, remembering their father's pride when she'd mastered a difficult piece. How he'd tell everyone within earshot that his daughter had magic in her fingers. So call Hudson, May said. Tell him yes. 2 weeks later, Lily found herself back at Hudson's Greenwich estate, this time seated at one of the grand pianos. She'd been coming twice a week for what Hudson called reacclimation sessions and private time to play on a professional quality instrument before her. Juilliard auditioned. Hudson had been surprisingly respectful of her boundaries. He provided the space but didn't hover or make demands. Sometimes he wasn't even home during her sessions. Today, though, he had asked if he could listen. Play whatever you'd like, he said, sitting in a chair near the window, far enough away to give her space. I promise not to interrupt or criticize, Lily nodded, placing her hands on the keys. She'd started with simpler pieces during her first sessions, rebuilding her technical skills, but today she felt ready for something more challenging. She began to play Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor, a piece that told a story without words, beginning gently, then building to moments of staggering emotional intensity. As she played, she could feel herself getting lost in the music again, the way she used to before the accident. For so long she'd been afraid of that feeling, afraid that losing herself in music meant betraying her parents' memory, neglecting her responsibilities to May. But now she understood that the opposite was true. This connection to music was her parents' greatest gift to her. When she finished, she looked up to find Hudson watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not quite sadness, not quite joy, but something in between. Your father would be proud, he said quietly. Did he teach you this piece? Lily asked. Hudson shook his head. He tried, but I wasn't ready for it. Too impatient, as I've said. He hesitated. I have something for you. He walked to a cabinet in the corner of the room and returned with an old cassette tape in a plastic case. The label was faded but still legible. Grace Chen, Bach Partitas. Your father gave me this when I was 12. Hudson explained, handing it to Lily. I've kept it all these years. Lily ran her fingers over the label, recognizing her mother's handwriting. I don't have anything to play it on. I do. Hudson went to another cabinet and pulled out a vintage cassette player. May I? Lily nodded, and he inserted the tape, pressed play, and stepped back. The sound quality was poor, with the telltale hiss of an amateur recording. But the music that emerged was unmistakably her mother. The distinctive tone, the graceful phrasing that Lily had tried to emulate all her life. Bach's Partita No. 2 in C minor, one of her mother's favorites. Lily closed her eyes, transported back to their old apartment. Her mother practicing in the living room while her father made dinner, May doing homework at the kitchen table, the family she'd lost but still carried within her. When the piece ended, she opened her eyes to find Hudson watching her, his expression solemn. Thank you, she said. For keeping this all these years. I should have returned it sooner, he replied, but I didn't know how to find your family after I heard about the accident. Something in his tone made Lily look at him more closely. You knew about the accident when it happened? Hudson nodded slowly. I read about it in the Times. They mentioned your father's name and that he had taught at Westport. I recognized it immediately. He paused. I sent flowers to the funeral, but I didn't sign my name. I didn't think it would mean anything to you or May. Lily remembered the mountains of flowers at the funeral, most from people she'd never met, her parents' former students, colleagues, friends from their music days. The thought that Hudson had been among them, a silent mourner for the teacher who had tried to reach him, made her chest tight. Your audition is next week, Hudson said, changing the subject. Do you feel ready? Almost, Lily admitted. There's one piece I still need to work on. The piece I was supposed to perform at my final recital, Rachmaninoff, Hudson guessed. Lily nodded. I haven't played it in full since before. Would it help to have an audience? A friendly one? Hudson gestured around the empty room. Just to get used to the feeling again? Lily considered the offer. She had been avoiding the Rachmaninoff, working around it, approaching it obliquely through other pieces, but she knew she would need to face it eventually. Yes, she said finally. But not just you. I'd like May to be here too. And maybe a few other people? Hudson nodded. I can arrange that. Tomorrow evening? The next day, Lily arrived at Hudson's estate to find the music room transformed. The furniture had been rearranged to create a small recital space, with about a dozen chairs set up facing the piano. May was already there, along with Carlos from the restaurant and his wife. Rick had come too, and a few other people Lily recognized from Oceano. Even the housekeeper was there, dressed in her Sunday best instead of her uniform. Is this okay? Hudson asked quietly as Lily took in the scene. Not too many people? It's perfect, she said, surprised to find she meant it. Thank you. As Lily took her place at the piano, she felt a familiar flutter of nerves, but also a sense of rightness that had been missing for 3 years. These people, some friends, some barely acquaintances, one former stranger who had bullied his way into her life and then, improbably, tried to make amends. They were here to witness her return to herself. She began to play the Rachmaninoff concerto, the piece that had been interrupted by tragedy, the piece that had become, in her mind, inextricably linked with loss. But as her fingers moved across the keys, as the complex emotional music filled the room, she felt something shift inside her. This wasn't an ending anymore. It was a beginning. The Rachmaninoff was written for piano and orchestra, but Lily made the piano sing all the parts. The mournful cellos, the soaring violins, the triumphant brass. She played for her parents, for May, for the dreams she'd set aside and was now reclaiming. She played for herself. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of complete silence. Then May was on her feet, applauding through tears. The others joined in, their faces showing that they understood they had witnessed something extraordinary. Hudson was the last to stand, his expression unreadable. But as Lily caught his eye, he gave her a small nod, acknowledgement, respect, perhaps even a kind of understanding between two people shaped by loss and the redemptive power of music. As the small audience gathered around her with congratulations, Lily felt lighter than she had in years. Tomorrow was her Juilliard audition. Next month, she would return to school. The future stretched before her, full of possibilities she had thought forever closed. And it had all started with a billionaire who had coerced a waitress to play piano, until she silenced the room with one song. 6 months later, Lily stood in the wings of Carnegie Hall, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through a gap in the curtains, she could see the packed auditorium, row after row of people in their finest clothes, programs open on their laps. Waiting for her. Breathe, whispered Dr. Abrams, her advisor from Juilliard. Remember, they're already on your side. Lily nodded, smoothing down the midnight blue gown she'd borrowed from the school's collection. She still couldn't quite believe she was here. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind. Her triumphant return to Juilliard, catching up on classes, preparing for this debut recital that had come much sooner than anyone expected. 5 minutes, the stage manager said. Checking something on his clipboard, Lily peered through the curtain again, scanning the front row. May was there, wearing a new dress bought specially for the occasion. Beside her sat Carlos and his wife from the restaurant, and Rick, who had given everyone the night off so they could attend. And at the end of the row, slightly apart from the others, was Hudson. He looked different tonight. Less the imposing billionaire, and more just a man in a suit, waiting for a concert to begin. He'd kept his distance these past months, never intruding on her studies. though his influence had smoothed her path back to Juilliard in countless ways. The Thomas and Grace Chen Fellowship was now a permanent endowment, ensuring that other talented musicians would receive the same opportunity she had. 2 minutes, the stage manager called. Lily closed her eyes and thought about the journey that had brought her here, from waitressing double shifts to standing backstage at Carnegie Hall in just 6 months. It seemed impossible, like something from a fairy tale, yet here she was. Her phone buzzed in the small clutch purse she'd set aside. A text from May. "Mom and Dad are here. I can feel them. They're so proud." Tears pricked at Lily's eyes. She quickly dabbed at them, careful not to smudge her makeup. And now came the announcement from the stage. Juilliard is proud to present the recipient of the inaugural Thomas and Grace Chen Fellowship, performing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 in C minor, accompanied by the Juilliard Orchestra. Please welcome Lily Chen. The audience applauded as Lily walked onto the stage, the spotlight momentarily blinding her. She made her way to the gleaming grand piano at center stage, adjusted the bench, and settled herself before it. The conductor nodded to her, ready to begin when she was. Lily took a deep breath and placed her hands on the keys. The piece began with solo piano, those famous opening chords that had once been so wrapped up with grief in her mind, but now felt like an old friend welcoming her home. As the orchestra joined in, Lily felt herself entering that magical space where nothing existed but the music. Her fingers moved with confidence and grace, finding each note precisely where it needed to be. The hours of practice, the years of training before the accident, the months of rebuilding afterward, all of it came together in this moment. When she reached the lyrical second movement, Lily allowed herself a glance at the audience. May was openly crying, a proud smile on her face. Hudson sat very still, his expression intense, fully absorbed in the music. The final movement was a test of endurance and technique, a marathon of complex passages that demanded everything a pianist had to give. Lily leaned into it, letting the music pour through her body swaying slightly with the tempo. The orchestra matched her perfectly, supporting without overwhelming, everyone caught up in the shared magic of Rachmaninoff's creation. As she approached the final crescendo, Lily felt a curious sensation, as if she weren't playing alone. She could almost feel her mother's hands guiding hers, her father's voice in her ear. "That's it. Lily, show them the magic." The final chords resounded through the hall, and then silence. That perfect moment of stillness after great music before the world rushes back in. Then the audience was on its feet, applause thundering around her. Lily stood slightly dazed and bowed. Flowers appeared in her arms, handed to her by the concertmaster. The conductor shook her hand, beaming with pride. As she took her final bow and left the stage, Lily felt herself trembling with emotion and spent adrenaline. Dr. Abrams was waiting in the wings. "Ready with a hug, magnificent," he said. Simply magnificent. The backstage area quickly filled with well-wishers, faculty members, fellow students, representatives from the music world. Lily accepted their congratulations in a happy daze until May pushed through the crowd and threw her arms around her. "You were incredible," May said, her voice muffled against Lily's shoulder. "Mom and Dad would be so proud." "I know," Lily whispered back. "I felt them there with me." When they separated, Hudson was standing a few feet away, holding a small bouquet of white roses. He looked uncertain, as if not sure he belonged in this moment. "Mr. Hudson," Lily said, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming." "I wouldn't have missed it," he replied, handing her the flowers. "You were extraordinary." "I had some help," Lily said, thinking of all the people who had made this night possible. Her parents who had given her the foundation, May who had never stopped believing in her, even Hudson himself, whose strange intervention had set everything in motion. "There's someone I'd like you to meet," Hudson said, gesturing to an elderly woman who stood nearby, leaning on a cane. "This is Mrs. Levine. She was my mother's piano teacher many years ago." The old woman stepped forward, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "My dear, you played that Rachmaninoff exactly as it should be played, with heart as well as technique. It was an honor to hear you." "The honor is mine," Lily said, genuinely touched. "Mrs. Levine has agreed to join the selection committee for next year's Chen Fellowship recipients," Hudson explained. "She'll help ensure that your parents' legacy continues in the right way." After the reception, When most of the crowd had dispersed, Lily found herself standing on the steps of Carnegie Hall with May and Hudson. The night was clear and cool, the streets of New York humming with their usual energy. "Where to now?" May asked. "I vote for pizza." "I'm starving," Lily laughed. "Pizza sounds perfect." They looked at Hudson, who seemed momentarily startled by the implicit invitation. I should let you two celebrate together," he said. "Family time." "Actually," Lily said, surprising herself, "I'd like it if you joined us. Just a simple dinner, nothing fancy. To say thank you." Hudson hesitated, then nodded. "I'd be honored. But I'm paying." "No way," May protested. "This is our treat. We're doing much better financially these days. You know." They ended up at a tiny pizza place a few blocks from Carnegie Hall, the kind of New York institution with checkered tablecloths and photos of celebrities on the walls. The owner recognized Hudson immediately and tried to give them the VIP treatment. But Hudson insisted on a regular table like any other customer. As they ate, Lily watched the unlikely connection between her sister and the billionaire who had changed their lives. May was telling Hudson about her pre-med classes, her plans for medical school, her dream of becoming a pediatric surgeon. Hudson listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions, his usual boardroom demeanor nowhere in sight. "I have a proposal," he said when May finished describing her volunteer work at a local hospital. "The Chen Foundation currently focuses on music education, but there's no reason it couldn't expand to include medical scholarships as well. Perhaps a program specifically for students interested in pediatrics." May's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" Hudson nodded. "Your sister has her fellowship. You should have support for your dreams too." "That's incredibly generous," Lily said. "But why would you do this?" Hudson was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. 6 months ago, I would have said it was to honor your father's memory, or to make amends for my behavior at the restaurant. But now, he looked at both sisters, now I'd say it's because helping talented young people pursue their passions is simply the right thing to do with resources like mine. "I'll drink to that," May said, raising her soda glass. They clinked glasses, and Lily felt a sense of completion, not an ending, but the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. The journey from that night at Oceano to Carnegie Hall had been unexpected, sometimes difficult, but ultimately healing. As they walked back onto the street after dinner, Hudson checked his watch. "I should get going. Early meeting tomorrow." He shook May's hand, then Lily's. "Congratulations again on a phenomenal debut." "Will we see you at the next fellowship recital?" Lily asked. "I wouldn't miss it," Hudson promised, "though I may try to be better behaved than the first time I heard you play." Lily laughed. "I'd appreciate that." They watched as Hudson walked to his waiting car, no longer a stranger or a tyrant or even a benefactor, but something closer to a friend. "Well," May said as they turned toward the subway, "that's not how I expected things to turn out when you came home from work that night and told me about the jerk billionaire who made you play piano." "Me neither," Lily admitted. "But I'm glad it did." As they descended into the subway station, Lily thought about the strange, winding path that had brought her back to music. One moment of coercion, one song that had silenced a room, and everything had changed. Her life had been transformed, not just by Hudson's money or connections, but by her own courage in facing the pain she'd been carrying and finding a way forward. Tomorrow she would be back at Juilliard, practicing for her next performance. Next week she had an interview with the New York Philharmonic about their Young Artist program. The future stretched before her, full of music and possibilities, and it had all begun with those first hesitant notes on the piano at Oceano, when a waitress had silenced a billionaire with one song.